You are listening to a Roamcast with Neil Kramer.
Now, please don't misunderstand me. This is more than a superstition, I know. The danger is very real. Is there no other way? But it's horrible. Please try and understand.
Yeah, we don't want to do anything to scare your children. That's the last thing we want to do. We don't want to scare anybody.
If something is just, it conforms to that which is factual and faithful to reality, and is, therefore, fair and true. The just is always authentic, always moral, always good. It can be nothing else. It is what any rational person would want, both for themselves and indeed for everyone. Justice is the conservation of what is just. The world we live in was designed to teach us all about justice, from the foundation of the earth, from the beginning, to observe and consider what is fair, to learn the vital importance of taking responsibility for oneself, how to hold oneself accountable, to judge ourselves by the highest standards now as we go through life week by week, to properly discriminate between good and evil, right and wrong, true and false. Like the art expert who can, at a glance, tell the genuine from the forgery, which everyone else is amazed at, because on the surface, to the untrained eye, the two paintings may look identical. The expert can see what is just because he's looking for it. The living knowledge of justice is not found on pages and on screens, but in the blood, sweat and tears of life itself. Comprehending justice is essential to our education in classroom earth. It is the nucleus of spiritual awareness. Justice is the process of the world being brought into final balance. And we each play a part in that. Billions of people from every nation, over millennia, choosing between what is just and what is unjust, privately, quietly, for themselves, in their own lives. Determining their own path by virtue of their God-given free will. The greatest gift in the universe. Everyone with equal access to what is real, regardless of circumstances, regardless of race, gender, education, background, history, conditions. Every single human soul equally bestowed with the power to choose that which is just. Small, large, light, heavy, simple, complex. We can always know. Strange then, is it not, that evidently most people choose to live untruthfully, to not know, because they feel safer that way. They go along with other people's ideas about life, which they haven't really thought about very carefully for themselves, which to me is inconceivable. To not study out anything important for oneself is madness. It is asking for trouble. Yet so many people feel deeply insecure and uncertain about making their own mind up about things. Shy about investigating reality for themselves. So they just go along. Along with what is popular, colourful, emotive, trending, engaging, diverting, comforting, safe. To these people, justice is a nice, abstract idea far off in the distance, something to do with courts and law. But as a close-up thing, in the felt experience of their own daily life, it is a foe. Why? Because real living spiritual justice brings truth, and that collapses their strategy of going along with things. Whether it is their manner of liberalism, which we'll speak about more in a moment, or New Aginess, or secular humanism, or some religious cult, or a life dedicated just to personal pleasure, justice messes all that up, so it is avoided. Not everyone chooses to live like this, thank God. Some people are deeply committed to conserving justice, both in their own life, in what is all around them, and to contributing to the wider field of the just. Such a person is passionate about the excellent and natural state of what is moral, what is fair, what is right. What is right is simply what is true. If it isn't true, it's not right. Cannot be, even if it wanted to. 2 + 2 = 4. That is right. Not 3. That's wrong. It's not up for debate. It's reality. It's right. Water is wet. Stealing is immoral. Fire is hot. Blood is red. Eagles fly. Wind blows. Any ideas to the contrary do not conform with reality. They are unjust. They are wrong. Whether we like the answers or not, it doesn't make any difference. Our preferences don't change reality. We don't make our own reality. We don't all have our own truth. It is made. It is here. It is absolute. It is objective. You either have some level of contact with it, greater or lesser, or you don't. You may choose your path of navigation, but the terrain is pre-existent. A man who appreciates and upholds rightness in life is a righteous man. That's literally what it means. Such a person is naturally dedicated to conserving justice. Because if you want to know about reality and learn from its sacred teaching, you will find yourself loving what is true. And a person devoted to this conservationism might be called a conservative. Not in the sense of a political outlook. I don't mean like Margaret Thatcher or George Bush. You see, at root, conservatism is a spiritual outlook. The theory and practice of conserving justice, balance, equity, truth. In this way, a conservative realizes that the entire enterprise of creation, life itself, is focused on the moral and spiritual education of human beings. The free will choices of a person, taken together over a lifetime, proves where the heart, mind, spirit, and deeds were pointed. Did they point to good or evil? Did they love the truth? Did they earnestly seek to know the Maker? Justice is whole in itself. It doesn't need a qualifying prefix. Anytime words are stuck in front of the word justice, they only diminish it. There's no such thing as social justice, or racial justice, or economic justice, or healthcare justice, or gender justice. They are the false constructs of identity politics, whereby any arbitrary group can claim reparations from an opposing identity group. African from Asian, poor from rich, sick from well, male from female, short from tall, fat from thin, disabled from able-bodied, old from young, stupid. Identity politics, critical race theory, social justice, political correctness, all that. Complete rubbish. Purposefully absurd. Empire trying to trick and disorient you. wanting to divide us, to blame and fight and complain and attack one another, whilst of course they look on in amusement at just how easily we lose ourselves in our own unnecessary chaos. Shame on us. Don't be one of those people. Think. Think. Be straight. Tell the truth. It matters. Indeed, a day is coming for everyone when your embodied truthfulness, your mature love, and your impulse for justice will matter more than anything else in the universe. Final judgment. The account books balanced. Those who chose to know. Those who insisted upon truth at all costs. Those who chose to know God. Those who chose to remain ignorant. Those who insisted upon avoidance at all costs. Those who chose to know nothing. Justice is at the heart of spiritual life. Everyone treated according to their choices, their morality, their deeds, atonement, growth, honesty. Ultimate, serene equity. You reap what you sow. Perfect justice. Only the evil would fear such a thing. Our destiny is always in our hands. I am reminded that there's always new people coming to my work. So, as I am going to refer to empire many times during this recording, let me take a moment or two to define this term. Of course, this will be a brand new description for some listeners, but even for people very familiar with my terminology, I think you'll learn a few new things. Empire is the human administration of a negative supernatural force. When I use the word empire, I'm denoting both an ideology and a group, both seeking to contain world society by restricting humans to a lower intellectual, physical, emotional, and moral condition. Empire is old, influential, collectivist, and evil. It is highlighted in the book of Daniel, where we see 4 beasts representing the Babylonian, Medo-Persian, Greek, and Roman empires. And we see that the Roman Empire transferred its reins of power from the emperors to the papacy. Power that was once militarily applied, now culturally applied. Far more insidious and controlling that way. And in this sense, we are still subject to that same evil empire today. Romanism did not stop. Imperium in imperio. An empire within an empire. Let's not fanny about with this. Empire is the working of Satan, a real, supernatural, genuine, metaphysical entity in whom evil is personified and anchored. His job is essentially to turn people away from God, and in so doing indirectly to turn them to himself. Satan is not God's adversary. God could disintegrate him with the click of his fingers. Satan is our adversary, utilized by God to test us. Satan is the tempter, the traducer, the traitor, and he seeks to mold us into his pattern, taking as many down with him into the lake of fire deletion vortex as possible. I believe the spiritual being of Satan voluntarily commenced his office of evil, and God accepted it. Evil is chosen by free will beings, angels, demons, Nephilim, humans, not necessitated by God. Empire requires the implicit consent of the people to function. It needs us to agree to its malice and treachery. It requires us to become complicit in it. So through this profound cultural and social manipulation over generations, people are persuaded into agreeing to their own spiritual incarceration. And the primary power of empire lies not in its might or cunning, but in its invisibility. And people who are totally heedless of its presence don't comprehend their own constriction. And today, in present times, empire uses predominantly left-wing ideologies to instill its collectivism and relativism into government, education, business, news, entertainment. And through those things, of course, therefore, into our heads. And even though right now empire is removing its cloak of invisibility and revealing itself, incredibly, people in their millions still give themselves to this literally satanic empire. Staggering, true, prophesied, calculated, known, chosen, sad. Is empire synonymous with the deep state, the cabal, the New World Order, globalism, internationalism and all that kind of thing? Yes, pretty much. Components of empire, I'd say. But to have a full conception of empire, to really understand it, you must comprehend its supernatural root. Because you see, it's not about money and power and control. It's about souls. One of the main reasons the world is in such a pickle right now is due to an approach to life and society that we call liberalism. When I was in my early teens, I thought a liberal was someone who was sort of open-minded and easygoing, interested in improving things, into like animal welfare and green environmentalism and healthy food and all that, and perhaps even was a bit of a busybody, a bit of a do-gooder, but was nonetheless a pretty decent person. So for me, at that time, a liberal was no big deal. Over the following 3 decades, I discovered that I was wrong in thinking those things. Sadly, I realised that my view was in fact nothing more than the result of imperial conditioning and was 100% false. I learned that liberalism, from its inception, was designed to masquerade as something good, whilst actually doing something very harmful indeed. Harmful to everyone. Whether left, right, centre, apolitical, impartial, doesn't matter. Everyone. And so in this recording, amongst other things, I'd like to spend a little time exploring, with as much common sense and honesty and lucidity as I have, why liberalism is so disingenuous. Because I think that that's at the heart of many of the problems right now that are kind of spiralling all around us. So to begin with, let's first take a very super zoomed out view on this whole business. A philosophically detached perspective from which we can and ought to exercise a very healthy degree of reasoned compassion. Liberalism is a trick empire uses to exploit fragile and gullible people. Mostly targeting people in great emotional pain. People bereft of spiritual substance, and who are therefore somewhat empty inside, and because of that are desperately looking for something to fill themselves. Empire seeks to install liberalism into such people who are troubled, anxious, indignant, and starving for something to believe in and something to belong to. Empire looks especially for that kind of profile, because it knows that a person's need to belong to something is a very profound instinct indeed. And empire mercilessly and cruelly exploits that instinct. And so we see this distorted emphasis on de-individuation, the purposeful diminishment of a person's sense of individuality and free will. And with a person's sense of self devalued, They're much easier to herd and steer. They gravitate into the imperial collective, where the principles and identity of empire are seemingly more important than one's own. So from this neutral vantage point, we can be a bit more understanding and patient with those who have fallen into this trap, especially as now I'm going to articulate some quite challenging things. Liberalism is a lifestyle choice that induces people to adjourn their own internal struggle and instead project their suffering onto someone else. The more troubled a person is, the more gratifying the transfer. In this sense, liberalism is a fantasy cult for people who can't deal with reality. So you join this cult that simulates positive advocacy and progressive reform, but really, in truth, is actually all about evading the spectre of your own inner suffering. Liberalism, which is really collectivism, proposes a world where individuals are absolved of moral culpability and spiritual accountability, just so long as they go along with and feed into the prefabricated social consensus. A consensus in which there is no absolute truth, no higher purpose, and no essential meaning. No God. No spirit. No creation. So no final moral judgment can be levied against an individual and the consequences of their own choices. The collective will take your shame and sorrow and cast the blame outwards to the perennial phantoms of injustice and inequality and prejudice, antagonists that can always be fought but never overcome by design. A battle against oneself projected on the outside, in which one can never prevail. But one can rage, and that rage is harnessed by empire. Like a car uses gasoline, like a fire burns wood. Used for their own ends, which are entirely set against human well-being. Of course, the socialist liberalism we see perpetrated by empire today bears very little resemblance to the moderate principles of progress and reform and tolerance that once was associated with Democratic Party politics of the 1960s and John F. Kennedy. That was all executed along with that poor fellow. And if you study the connections, you can see why empire had to get rid of him. So the liberalism we have now is something entirely different. Liberalism delivers permanent diversion, perpetual immersive distraction, with different levels of severity depending on your social strata. If your life is okay and reasonably comfortable, then you get hopeful dreams of community and change and safety and happiness. Simulated compassion, mechanical, lifeless virtue signalling, passive-aggressive, forced positivity. If your life is rubbish and uncomfortable and you're close to the gutter, then you get drive-through, quick-fix radicalism. Break the system, break people, no morality. Nothing is true, everything is permitted. Nichts ist wahr, alles ist erlaubt. A phrase sometimes remarked upon by old Friedrich Nietzsche, a saying that may have originated from an ancient Islamic militia group known as the Hashashiyan. The assassins. They were like a covert death squad working for the state's intelligence services, way back in Persia and Syria in the 11th century, some time ago now. What empire offers people through their corrupt liberalism is a dangerously addictive but seemingly effective painkiller. The more discord someone has inside themselves, the more they are encouraged to spit their venom outward onto someone else. The more pain, the more projection. Diverting attention away from their own spiritual hollowness via permanent exteriorized dispute and blame. The more a person's anguish is spun centrifugally outwards, the less they are disposed to look inward, where the real pain is, where the real solution to their problem is. Pain and solution, yeah. And make no mistake, when a person willingly and routinely and unremorsefully negates personal responsibility in favour of conveying guilt to an extraneous source, they are self-harming. They harm themselves and the people around them. Though they are told this wounding is the result of their being victimised by someone else. It's not their fault. It's Trump, or Christians, or heterosexuals, or masculine men, or family structures, or the police, or racism, or economic disparity, or gender, or healthcare, or something, anything, just not themselves. The fact that this scam of chronically and falsely relocating blame outside of oneself has become so normative does not in any way diminish its status as a paralysing mental and spiritual illness. It is. And now we've had generations of this collectivist sickness, which empire packages as liberalism. We observe a diseased international society, composed of countless people who spend their entire lives in a state of perpetual emotional infantilism. They don't want truth. They don't want mature life. That's the last thing they want. They would much prefer to live in their fantasy role-playing world where unreal things appear true. They're not regressive, they're progressive. They don't comply, they resist. They're not asleep, they're woke. They don't give up, they persist. They don't divide, they unite. They don't separate, they coexist. They don't restrict speech, they promote civil liberties. Imperial collectivism, aka liberalism, replaces God with culture. Have you noticed that? You'll see very often that people who demonstrate a high degree of cultural immersion, and perhaps even sophistication, also frequently exhibit a corresponding spiritual impoverishment. It strikes me that liberal overindulgence in cultural ornamentation, in art, literature, music, theatre, dining, socialising and so on, all that in reality constitutes a pretty despairing attempt to fill their undivine world with something else. But without God, there can be no essential purpose or peace, no art, no music, no advocacy, no fight, no campaign. Everyone knows that deep down in the bones. And yet they stuff their spiritual void with cultural candy and artistic fluff. Now, as you know, I love art and music, and I love great food, but they are in no way comparable to the power and peace of spiritual life. They'll always be pretty low down on the totem pole. They are little fripperies, little reveries, nice, but ultimately not important. To think otherwise would be shameful, self-harming idolatry. So what does it take to turn all this around? Imagine being brutally honest with yourself and realising that you had everything upside down. You weren't resisting and waking and being progressive or anything remotely like that. You were actually aiding and abetting world-killing supernatural evil. Your shameful acquiescence and chosen stupidity made you an accomplice, an accessory to evil. Imagine, with head bowed, you begin to take responsibility for yourself, to face pain, be humbled, realise there is higher purpose, and shock horror, every individual is accountable and will be judged. And in this state of sincere, open-minded honesty, to ask God for forgiveness, which he will gladly give, if it is indeed an honest and authentic admission of guilt. It's not just being said as an insurance policy. The path of truth is open to everyone equally. Every day brings fresh opportunities to turn oneself around, reflect, contemplate, speak the truth, resolve to head northwards. I've seen people do it gradually, finally, turn around, do a 180. Let go of their favourite drugs of blame and projection. I've seen them get clean. We are not doomed to repeat endless generations of Empire's collectivist brainwashing of otherwise good people. We can stop it. We need not feel despairingly entombed in a narcissistic society that is normalizing psychosis. It is a choice, day by day, year by year, one person at a time. Love the truth. That's the antidote. Love the truth. Learn it. Share it tactfully. And a word here to all sensitive spiritual people for a moment. You. The world is undergoing mass destabilization, which we'll come to. A very willfully oblivious secular society is beginning to realize its own spiritual desolation and catastrophic disavowal. Countless lingering ancient evils and untruths are coming home to roost. And the current nonsense of fake plagues and fake racism, fake anarchy, fake gender, fake medicine, fake technology, fake culture, fake everything, each fake flavour serves as a focal point for serious mental and emotional collapse in people. Their lifestyle of renouncing reality is catching up with them. You and I, dear listener, are unavoidably affected by this additional psycho-spiritual pressure in the world right now. It weighs upon us like the closeness in the air before a storm. It is a singular time. The whole of world society, made up of our little towns and villages and cities all over the world, is fracturing and aching and groaning under the weight of a lifetime of lies. Be mindful, therefore, to properly discriminate between the natural exertions from your own inner work and the fatigue and grief from the dissolution of the world. It's easier than one might think to inadvertently conflate them. So I say to you again, contemporary liberalism has not organically grown upwards from the hearts and minds of the people. It's not a good thing. It is a vicious psychological deception designed to cull people's dignity, liberty, and free will, to turn them away from everything divine. The loving teacher, the Father of the all, triune in nature. That is the Theos, the person of his deity, Pneuma, the transmission of his immortal life-giving spirit, and Logos, the manifestation in the flesh of his sublime creational word. Liberalism ignores, attacks, denies, mocks all of that. Shame on them. Behind Empire is a supernatural evil entity devoted to the spiritual desolation of humankind. I mean that literally. I'm not speaking poetically or figuratively here now. This supernatural warfare has been happening for a long time. Anyone can choose to see it if they wish. The truth is available. It is out there in life. When we truly set our mind and our heart and our soul upon truth, we change everything around us in more profound ways than you can imagine. Your grace, your sound mind, your brave heart, your unique, singular, totally one-pointed individuality. When you take all of those things together, and when you turn those things toward godly life, you give Satan a black eye every morning you wake up, and Empire fades all the faster.
Three, eh? You did say three? Yeah. And he's got kids by two of them. You're joking. It's unbelievable. I mean, I know he's a bit eccentric, but perhaps it's his religion. Maybe he's a polygamist. Yeah, one of the Salt Lake City mob. Yeah, I think that's a Mormon. Yeah. Oh, excuse me. Same again, Bert. Please. Oh, get out with you, Arthur. Winchester Club, can I help you?
Good evening. I'm from the Ministry of Sex Equality. I'm here tonight to explain the situation man to man. Or as we have to say now, person to person. My name is Mr. Stroke Mrs. Barker. But I don't advise any of you to try it. Stroking Mrs. Barker. Now, due to this new law, no one is allowed to be called male or female, man or woman. Now, this has already caused a great deal of argument in Parliament, so they're all going for a parliamentary conference at Manchester, or as we now say, Personchester. They will all stay in a nudist colony and air their differences. Members only, of course. But how does this affect you? Well, is it easy to become unsexed? Well, it can be done. And I represent the proof. At least half of me does. The other half represents the poof. Now, the first thing we have to realize is that for too long, women have been beneath men. Not only in the home, but in the office as well. Now, the main area of change, of course, will be in the language. The man in the street will become the person in the street. Whoever you are, whether man or woman, you will be the person in the street. Incidentally, when I was in the street the other day, I nearly fell down a person hole, so be glad. Now, certain professions will have their names changed, from the chairperson of a large company right down to the humble dust person. Not to be confused, of course, with the famous film star Dustin Hoffperson. Now, speaking of films, there will be special feature films made showing the equality of the sexes, already in production, a new musical called 7 Persons for 7 Other Persons, starring Paul Newperson with choreography by Robert Helpperson, and music by Person Tavani and his orchestra. Now, dress. Dress, of course, you won't be expected to dress like this. This sort of costume is much too expensive. Half a knicker certainly doesn't cover it. Each person can, of course, choose what to wear, provided it includes the customary shirt, bra, underpants, and handbag. Shoes can be black or brown, according to individual taste. I myself find that black shoes taste rather better than brown ones. Jobs, too, will be entirely sexless, with 1 or 2 obvious exceptions. What are they, you may ask? You may ask, but I'm not telling on this program. But here is a clue. They have jam on them and appear at tea time. The recent idea by the ministry to avoid confusion is to call a man a doings and a woman a thingy. This offends no one and makes conversation clearer. Thus, we instantly recognize the book called Little Thingies, or the musical called My Fair Thingy, or the play by George Bernard Shaw called Doings and Super Doings. There are times, however, when it sounds better to stick to the word person. The person in the street is still better than the doings in the street, of course. That's something to look out for and steer clear of. Finally, don't let this new law alter your life. After all, what's in a name? I know that whatever we're called, my own dear thingy and myself will carry on as usual, wearing each other's clothes. And that however we, the people, are thought of by the ministry, tonight, all over Britain, all those thingies and doings will be together in front of the fire as usual. Good night.
During the Trojan War of the 12th century BC, after a rather lengthy and unproductive overt siege of Troy, which at the time was an independent city, the Greeks decided, instead, to use a more covert means of attack. So they constructed a large wooden horse and hid a team of specialised soldiers inside it. And then the Greeks pretended to retreat in defeat. And after the smoke had cleared, the Trojans then pulled this giant wooden horse inside their city gates as a sort of victory trophy. And that night, as the Trojans all slept, the Greek soldiers sneaked out of that horse, opened the city gates, and let in the rest of the army, which ultimately resulted in the total destruction of Troy. And of course, from this, we get the metaphor of the Trojan horse, which has come to mean any stratagem that causes a target to willingly invite an enemy inside. Liberalism is a Trojan horse. It pretends to be about equity and evolution, but it's really about division and despiritualization. It is against natural divine order. For a good while now, it's been the perfect narcotic for dark forces to demean people into secular robot cultists. Communism, fascism, Marxism, socialism, liberalism, same thing. Transhumanists fantasizing that they can marry themselves to AI and reign supreme as monarchs of the earth, transcending morality and erasing nature, same thing. And it has to be said, there are a disturbing number of Trojan horses at play in mainstream society. Some are rather unsurprising, frankly, but some are distinctly alarming. I would say prominent examples of Trojan horses today are the European Union, the United Nations, Planned Parenthood, American Civil Liberties Union, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, Southern Poverty Law Center, the Federal Reserve, LGBTQ, liberalism, secular humanism, transhumanism, common purpose, vaccines, 5G, Google, Twitter, Facebook, Netflix, Amazon, Hollywood, big pharma, big agriculture. Half of life, really. Total deceptions. The reality gap between the overt, quasi-legitimate front of these organizations and their covert, real, evil purpose is immense. And most employees and consumers and advocates, of course, choose, through keeping their lenses dirty and distorted on purpose, to know little or nothing about any of this treachery. Each Trojan horse attacks a different part of society. They all have specific targets to go after over the years. But they do all share one common goal, which is to turn people away from God, by turning them away from a thirst for truth, for justice, for morality, for goodness, which lead to God. The Trojan horses try to make goodness look lame, old-fashioned, uncool, to make truth seem judgmental and offensive, to make God seem antiquated, unjust, discriminatory, surplus to requirement, a remnant from an age of primitive unawareness. Quite unnecessary when we have science. This is why many imperially conditioned people exhibit the common traits of superiority, passive aggression, and godlessness they've been trained to. Though, of course, they sometimes pose as community-focused and peaceful and virtuous. This facade, though, doesn't last very long in broad daylight before it kind of rapidly bursts into flames from the heat of their own smouldering self-loathing. As we remarked earlier, Empire needs our consent to do bad stuff to us. Because though Satanic Empire is indeed innately wicked, it is nonetheless subject to divine ordinance. It cannot go against one's holy will, free will, the power of determination. The choice and practice of good or evil. So Empire needs your signature, as it were, on each order of mischief that it issues. And it harvests consent by the trick of constructive notice. It posts its intentions upon the notice boards of the newspapers, the media, the movie industry, TV, internet, educational institutions, dramas, chimeras, fictions of all kinds, everywhere. We've talked about this before, we know this, but it's good to put it in this context here. And not only is it predictive programming, as some commentators refer to it, but it's also a reaping of emotional submission. Silence is consent. People's inaction sanctions Empire's evil. So, to turn things around, we must say no. Activate our refusal in heart, mind, body. Speak it, write it, illustrate it, teach it, broadcast it, propagate it. Warranted in spirit is this. Sometimes we say no with splintering truth, and sometimes by way of elegant revelation. Truth dissolves untruth, The treacherous cannot withstand the daylight. Nemo malus felix. The mainstream media play a very important role in selling the illusion of the Trojan horses. Of course, the conventional media is nothing more than an intelligence operation, always has been. If you study the inception of the BBC, you come to see that it was always a propaganda tool. Straight up, they don't even hide it. It still is a propaganda tool. And some of their reporting today on subjects wide and diverse, ranging from Trump to 9/11 to Q to history to ethnicity to war. I mean, it's amongst the most scandalous and obnoxious disinformation I've ever seen in my life. It makes me sick to the stomach. As bad or worse even than CNN, NPR, New York Times and all that. Astonishing. And I think it's significant for us to draw our attention to the fact that the media's main role is to fabricate consensus. To give you the impression that there is a received opinion on things, on people, on ideas, on places. They'll tell you what everyone's thinking, what most people think, what the polls are showing, all that. And various persuasive advocates are wheeled out like kind of second-hand Daleks who sort of look the part and give the vague impression of fading mirages of consensus. But it's not true. You see, it's all just a game of belief. It's not knowledge, it's not truth, it's not reality, it's not just. It is, by design, deceptive, unjust, false. But you see, from what we discussed earlier, that doesn't matter when your target audience don't want truth, remember. They want collectivist drugs. They're on blame and projection. A bowl or two of that a day. So the media dish it out. There are also, as you know, different tiers of media for different kinds of people. The junk tabloid newspapers and trash websites with bite-sized fried news nuggets for people with very short attention spans and bad informational diets, you know the ones. And then there's the slightly more apparently grown-up content that one finds in places like NPR and BBC Radio 4, The Guardian, The New York Times, The Telegraph, The Washington Post, etc. And I have to say it is this latter category that are, to me, especially despicable. Really revolting and perverse what they're doing to journalism. And as I record this in the early autumnal days of October 2020, there is such a flagrant incendiary reporting right now of anything to do with race, isn't there? Wicked incitement to violence by the conventional media. Now, if that isn't a strong sign of collusion in evil, I don't know what is. The language they use, the misleading pictures, cynically chosen videos, the fear-mongering tone, the false context, all designed to embolden a pre-packaged narrative of systemic racism, totally fictional. These organisations and their many dishonourable journalists are trying to make us hate each other. Now, the further you go up the chain, only a tiny number of people need to be in on it, that know about the Satanism. The rest don't know anything about anything, other than that they like the benefits bestowed upon them by mysterious power brokers somewhere. Whispers of some dark sex sacrifice, something or other, but they don't really know. That's most acolytes. They don't know. Most A-list actors, musicians, celebrities you've ever heard of, they are complicit. They shamefully feed into it, but they don't know. They're just entertainers. They have no wisdom. A few are okay, of course, but most no. And a few of the really bad ones, they creep upwards and are initiated into the dark order. They take an oath. They acquire a fat control file. A big old file full of their repulsive crimes and misdeeds. They are blackmailed. And they're given more humans and drugs to consume. They have handlers. They do and say as they are told, and their life belongs to someone else. This information we're talking about here is freely available, outside of the mainstream, of course, but freely available. Do you know about it? Do you want to know about it? Is it important that you know about it? Let me say a few words about Donald Trump, as I do get a lot of questions about this guy. What do I think of him? Is he good? Is he bad? Is he a saviour? What's going on? Is he with the secret project? Is he just a deception? Is he a clever stooge? What's going on? Trump, good. Not a magical saviour, but undoubtedly he is a massive nightmare for empire. A giant pterodactyl in the ointment. I like him. He has done more good for America and the world than any other world leader I've ever seen in my life. One big major difference, however, is that you can't see some of the larger things he's done yet, because much of it is necessarily covert, necessarily behind the scenes. But we shall see these things in time. Trump speaks straight. He gets stuff done. He's not racist, of course. He's not bigoted. He's not xenophobic. He loves America. He knows it's exceptional, which it totally is. He doesn't talk shit to us. He is not exploiting Americans like Obama, Clinton and the Bushes did. He is not disloyal like they were. Most people I speak to love Trump, in every strata of society. And at first they were quiet about it, but now I've noticed they're getting more vocal, even though the media are trying to suppress that. And I talk to people in the street, in cafes, airports, waiting rooms, supermarkets, whatever, just like everyone else. Most people like Trump. Thank God, they say, thank God for Trump. And on the other side of things, with every case of Trump derangement syndrome that I've witnessed, the seething person was already pretty messed up, already into blame, big style. Already doing all of that before Trump showed up. And now he's here. To them, of course, Trump is the perfect target to receive their projected self-loathing. Perfect. What a gift to them. Lovely. They love to hate, don't they? Donald Trump is an enemy of empire. Therefore, he is an ally to all those who wish to see satanic empire end. He is pro-America, good, pro-life, pro-equality of opportunity, pro-Christian, pro-honesty, pro-constitution, all good things. Pro-family, pro-right to bear arms, great. Pro-energy independence, pro-manufacturing, pro-history, pro-military and law enforcement, good. Pro-dismantling the corrupt big tech and big pharma world killers, good. Pro-everything that I like. So I like him. I've not seen anyone else do that, ever. Nowhere near. And Trump has also rescued more children and adults from human sacrifice and trafficking networks than you could believe. And we're talking millions here. But again, the full story on that would point to the mind-blowing involvement of public figures in trafficking for decades that would send most of the nation into the loony bin. So Trump has to keep his gob shut on that, and sometimes he lets little clues out and things, but he knows that the so-called optics are relatively important in his campaign against empire. And Trump is against the things that I'm against. Socialism, communism, the swamp, sedition, internationalism, forced diversity, leeches, illegal immigration, sanctuary cities, the sexualization of children. What a lot of people really struggle with concerning Trump is that he does destroy the old illusions people had about American political, cultural and business life. He sort of shatters the artifice of all the fake statesmanship and internationalism, into a million pieces. He has brought decades of political posturing and deceit to an end in a few short years. Sure, JFK was all right in office, and Reagan not too bad too. But honestly, really from November 1963 right through to January 2017, we've had 54 years of unscrupulous governance in the White House. And it goes back before that. So people just don't really have any idea of the magnitude of the evil empire that we've been under for so long. They've got no clue of it. None. It's not just a swamp in DC, it's a stinking sewer that stretches across Europe, Africa, Asia, and down to Australasia too. It's big. In every area of life, not just politics, throughout every segment of our life, this evil corrupts. And as I say, even in modern times, figures like JFK and Reagan, although they might have been attempting to do something good, they were in an impossible position with deeply compromised and corrupt intelligence services all around them, controlling families no one had even heard of, exercising enormous influence through giant corporations and huge banking cartels, and, as I say, the compromised bad cells within the intelligence services. And all of this coming together to instruct the office of the president in what he can and cannot do, or get shot. People die in plane crashes, sudden heart attacks, disappear all the time. Easy to arrange. So after Johnson, Nixon, Ford, Carter, all very deeply controlled and compromised, we had the outright debauchery of George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama for 28 years. 28 years of evil. That's a long time. 1989 to 2017. Some people listening to this, that's your whole life. And for the rest of us, it's a big part of our life. Now, Donald Trump is not perfect. Where can I begin? He can be vulgar, he can be immodest, and very stubborn. But that and all the million other things, so what, I say? Can you think of a better person to do what he has to do? When you position him between a population and empire, he is a shield being pelted by arrows, like a pincushion. He is a battering ram. He is a Heyoka too, a challenger, an exposer. He does things though like no one else could, no one. Anyone else would have been totally crushed or hopelessly corrupted by now, but not him. He's straight. He's straight. Orange man good. If you care about truth, about reality, if you appreciate the Constitution, if you hate empire, if you loathe imperial relativism and collectivism, if you love all that is just in life, if you love freedom, endorse Trump. The Democratic Party in America, bolstered by the mainstream media, wholly directed by empire, know they cannot win in a straight fight. They cannot afford, therefore, to fight fair. They know they will lose. So they have an alternative strategy for the coming time: social destabilization. This will not work. It is already failing. Empire has miscalculated. Miscalculated empire? The all-powerful empire? How can it miscalculate? Because, for the first time ever, they do not have the intelligence services and the military under their sway. They are in the dark, flying blind. Lots of errors. Some of them irreversible, cataclysmic. Which is a good thing. Even though the temperature, as you might say, gets turned up uncomfortably hot for all of us now and again. Better though, isn't it, than our remaining cool and them remaining invisible and controlling. No blind hope here, by the way. No dreaming of saviours, not Trump, not Q, not JFK Jr., not the Patriots, not the secret ninjas, not the reanimated Hyperborean elite guard. And if Trump helps, and Q helps, and unexpected secret figures help, thank you, fantastic, we'll take it, hallelujah, yes please. But this is not the source of our power. From where then? What is the source of our power? From whom? Where do I find salvation? From whom do I get my bulletproof courage? Who made me? From where does all wisdom emanate? Who teaches the most sacred spiritual Navy SEAL instruction of all time? Who can I trust implicitly? Who loves me unconditionally? Who is my champion, my guardian? Who is always right? Who is always good? The classroom, in the end, ultimately shall go up in flames. We know this. But they're not the flames of man. They're not the flames of a human hand. They are eternal flames. Disintegrated, all of it, when we graduate. The world, by design, finite. The matrix unrendered in fire. The elements themselves melt with fervent heat, and all that dwell in light shall go forward, and all that cannot will perish. just. COVID. Where to begin on that? Goodness me. What a wild goose chase. What brazen chicanery. A marvel to behold, is it not? A striking and salutary tale in what it looks like when an unthinking population places its ongoing blind trust in false authorities. All fur coat and no knickers. A gold medal psyop. Well done, Empire. Along with the age, shape and size of the Earth and World War I and II, Darwinian evolution, space, you've done it again. Well done. A giant pretend plague and all the world wearing silly masks. Congratulations on another stupendous mountain out of a molehill. COVID is transparent tripe. And for those millions who know that, of course they wonder why more people aren't looking into it and speaking against its palpable falsehood. I mean, really, for anyone over the age of 12, it takes one afternoon, a few short hours, to sit down and set about the task of very straightforward, very methodical, factual research on COVID-19. Get all the data. Study it, think about it, compare it. It's not hard. Then conclude. And then you have a quandary. Because you come to see that there is no big virus problem. Even if you believe the grossly inflated death figures, you still come up with less deaths than normal flu. People who were okay 1 minute apparently get this thing, then drop over dead. Tiny number. Even the CDC figures, less deaths than the normal flu. So why are we wearing masks exactly? Even if you go along with germ theory, it doesn't make any logical sense. If you go with terrain theory, there is literally no problem. Whichever, there is nothing to fear. Behave in the usual manner. Look after yourself, look after your well-being, eat well, drink clean water, spring water, detox from time to time, heal your inner and outer heart, boost your immune system, and your body will see off problems. You're more likely to be killed by a rampaging hippopotamus than COVID-19. I can't get super worked up about this. I mean, the masks are funny to me. They make me laugh. When we had natural wildfires last year here in western Washington state, and the year before, I wore a bandana around my neck when I was hiking. And when the air was particularly bad because of the smoke, particulates and whatnot, I pulled it up over my face, like a cowboy herding cattle on a dusty desert farm. So donning that bandana for me occasionally is no big deal. I mostly don't wear a mask, certainly not outside anywhere at all, and many inside places it's not necessary either. So personally I don't get wound up about masks. I know some people get very upset and militant about them. I don't. I put one on very occasionally when I want to blend in. I exercise the operator protocol, and I've done so for a good 30 years now easily. It's a covert military or intelligence services principle, very simple. Becoming the grey man, dark blue jeans, dark shirt, baseball cap, dark car, no bling, blend in, move unnoticed. Then you can operate from within the belly of the beast. Stand out and you can't operate. No use to me that. I give Satan a black eye every day in a dozen different ways, mostly as an operator, exposing his rubbish tricks. The masks, though, do point to the larger question, don't they? Which is, why are so many otherwise sensible people buying into this provably artificial problem? COVID is not difficult to overturn. Why do people not see it? Because if an honest person realises that COVID is largely, if not entirely, fictitious, and most world leaders and senior scientists have gone along with it, then what else is horribly untrue in our mainstream life? Probably a lot of things for a long time. If something that big can be that false, then it bodes ill for what other mammoth fairy tales we might be stood right on top of. So for you and me, we're used to that, right? No big deal. But for the common person in the street, that is hard. So it's not really just the issue of, is this virus thing as bad as they say? It's more of a foundational existential problem than that for many people. They're not at all prepared to conceive of the fact that they're in a fallen world and are undergoing a sacred spiritual warfare education. They're just not there. They don't even think good and evil are real things, let alone anything else. They think good and evil are movable, personal, cultural, mutable ideas about human life. They don't know they have a supernatural origin outside human life. They don't believe evil is coaxing them slowly but surely, year by year, to approach the precipice of total soul destruction. Impenitent people launching themselves over the cliff into permanent nothingness at death. Souls deleted. How can this be? Because things like COVID demonstrate that most people don't want to think for themselves. They don't want to know. They don't want to determine reality outside of the false consensus. They cannot imagine what sort of life that would lead to. So they just go along. Far easier, more secure, more comfortable, more predictable, more socially acceptable. This is death. No interest in the sacred living knowledge of good and evil, right and wrong, true and false. No interest in forming the essential spiritual characteristics of love, humility, devotion, trustworthiness, competence. No interest in cultivating spiritual understanding and sharing it. No interest in the deity that made them, beckoning us day by day towards divine discovery, toward the next phase of our life. No interest. The immortal realm where our full human life truly begins. Way up the dimensional ladder, a destiny offered to all, everyone who ever lived. Equal invitation. Take it or leave it. When you love truth, when you are devoted to what is real, you will transform. The deeper you go into the divine classroom of earth, the more you will change. Your mind will change. Your heart will change. Growth in theology, philosophy, devotion, atonement, capability, knowledge, humility, body, spirit, breath, life, touch. The cleaner the vessel of self, the more wisdom pours inward. And on this path, you realize that some of the stuff you really thought you knew was wrong. And some things you didn't know at all, you come to discover afresh. And in so doing, of course, you will be needing to contradict yourself. If you are committed to knowing reality and are not contradicting yourself from time to time, something has gone wrong. Contradict. The very word, from the Latin, contradicere. Contra, against, dicere, say or speak. Contradiction, meaning therefore to speak against. To diverge from point A to point B. To speak against what you once said or thought. Rather unsurprisingly, in a real transformational life, if this wasn't happening, your truth pledge would be in question, would it not? When I was 5 years old, I thought Santa Claus was a real person, or Father Christmas as we called him in Cheshire in England. And he magically came down the chimney and sipped a glass of sherry, and his reindeer nibbled on a carrot that my mum and dad left on a little table by the fireside. I've since come to contradict myself on that one. When I was 10 years old, I thought most adults know what's happening in the world. I have now contradicted myself on that one too. I once thought that the Earth was spinning around an unremarkable star in an unremarkable galaxy. I once thought animal life evolved between species upward from pond slime to fish to frogs to monkeys to men. I thought everyone in the end makes it to the next world. I thought lots of things. And now, with more fidelity and more experience in truth, more awareness of the construction of reality, I've changed my mind on things. I've contradicted myself, thank God. Various things relating to metaphysics, theology, esotericism, emotional intelligence, science, history. Old views, upgraded, overcome, some thrown out from time to time. When you care about what is real, you change your mind when you acquire and road test better, proven, living data. You contradict yourself. No ego, no pride, no shame, no big deal. You spin on a dime. You say to yourself, damn, I was wrong about that. Can't believe it. I really thought that was a thing. Oh well, who cares? Now I know. Now I know better. That's what counts. When one has a zeal and a hunger for what is pure and factual, when you enrich your understanding of existence, you transform your mind, your heart, your flesh. Spirit incinerates misconceptions, reduces them to ashes, and in time from those ashes arises the real. Lovers of truth are not interested in appearing right, but in being right, not in maintaining or defending an unchanged view over decades, but in finding truth, above all else. How that looks to other people should be of pretty little significance, or better still, none at all. Indeed, it is healthily humbling, is it not, to change your mind on a big thing, to be chastened by reality. And if you're in the public eye, in a big or small way, you'll have people disapproving when you change your mind. And some of those people are just confused, some are angry, and some are sad, because they want you on their side and are emotionally unsettled when you apparently defect to some other view. A few people who are projecting saintliness or irreproachability or higher authority onto you, they will be very troubled when you change your mind on something, because then it means you're not a saint, you are impure, you're just a regular old human dipstick like them. So you fail them. You changed your mind on something, which you're not supposed to do. Gladly, I don't see too much of this. A bit, but not much. I'm not up my own arse enough to give the impression of mystical holiness. I'm just this guy, thinking clearly, feeling deeply, being honest, hungry for the truth. That's all. You don't have to agree with what I think, but I think most people who've been observing and sharing in my material for a little while now, they know I'm dead serious about truth. I always make great effort to communicate with some degree of civility, decency, tact, consideration, maturity, eloquence, as far as I can. But some people are always going to be upset. And when you speak publicly, you get used to that. After the first year or two, which was a long time ago for me now, you learn to stop trying to please everyone and be the peacemaker all the time. It's not your job. Your job is to communicate as maturely as you can in the best manner you see fit. End of story. All any of us ever really do is share our take on reality. And when you see things in that light, you start to recognize that it is often unnecessary to explain yourself. You don't need to quantify or excuse or justify anything. If I say I think reincarnation is rubbish, that's it. I don't need to say why. If I say liberalism is daft, I don't need to substantiate that. I may choose to. I may give a full treatment to why I think such and such a thing, whether in a brief recording like this, or a longer workshop recording, or a book form, a long form, or personal teaching sessions over decades with some people. And I think that's a very important and empowering and inspiring thing for us to remember. It is a healthy thing to cease to feel like we need to explain and justify our thoughts and actions to people. It can be wonderful, of course, to share our reasoning and speculations and analysis with mature people, with those people who have a proven track record of applying wisdom and spirit and reason in their own life. And with such mature people, it is just lovely to talk. And sometimes it is even more pleasing to listen to their expositions, their elevations of wisdom and feeling, to attend, to gather, to witness. To thirst for the truth is to compel change, inside and out. You change yourself for truth. You do not change truth for yourself. You cannot. The times we live in today demonstrate this perhaps better than at any other historical period I can think of. The speed and reach of communication, the breadth and depth of the information at our fingertips, the availability of truth, the extreme intense polarization between good, evil, right, wrong, true, false, right in your face. No one has any excuse not to care about reality. Empire is dying, and the giant fake societies built upon it must therefore necessarily fall. These things happen because untruth cannot go onward, literally. And this is a good thing. So though the world has gone mad, and it is strange and difficult to behold, it is prophecy, it is known, it is necessary. Can empire win? No. Is evil more powerful than good? No. Did Europe and America and Asia and Africa have fantastic, beautiful, functioning, mature societies anyway? No. Were the science and education and technology and business worlds built on integrity and devoted to truth? No. So do we really want things to go completely back to normal? No. Does it make us a little uncomfortable to see culture imploding? Yes. Is it sad to see how needlessly painful everything is? Yes. Is it intellectually and emotionally tiring to deal with people who love untruth? Yes. Are a lot of things in the world going to be permanently different from now on? Yes. Might our personal plans and routines have to change? Yes. Might we suffer? Yes. Should any of these things unduly concern children of God? No. Do you know your glorious spiritual heritage? Do you know your eternal destiny? To know, we must devote ourselves to what is true, to what is good, and to seek God with all our heart. When we remember these things, we know that the peculiar happenings of life, especially now, serve always and only to strengthen us, to teach us, to enrich us. I would advise you to pay special heed to the following words and to take strength from them, given as they were so beautifully by the Apostle Paul. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of a sound mind.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Roamcast. Neil Kramer loves you. You heard clips from the following: dialogue from the 1958 movie, Horror of Dracula. Dialogue from the British TV show, Minder. Dialogue from the 1976 British TV show, The Two Ronnies. The songs, Hustle Harder, and Trusting Each Other, from the artist, Vortex. Shared under a Creative Commons license. You can find out more about Vortex from visiting the website vortex.com. If you liked any of those clips, support the artists and go buy their stuff. That's all for now. See you again soon. Until then, we wish you a beautiful day.